Coming up next, CityNet 30 takes you downtown for the weekly luncheon meeting of the City Club of Portland. Live weekly coverage of City Club is produced through the facilities of Portland Cable Access. Now we join the City Club for this week's program.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm Paddy Tillett, President of the City Club. Welcome to a program that will focus on the digital divide that separates those with information access from those in our community who lack the necessary technology and skills. Our guest speakers today are Mayor Vera Katz, Commissioner Sten, and Rey Ramsey, CEO and Chairman of the Board of Economy Corporation. This program is one of several in a series to honor Portland's 150th birthday. But first, some announcements. Please join us for a program next Friday, July the 20th, focusing on the business economy in Portland, with longtime Portlander and City Club member Ralph Shaw, and that will be here at the MAC. We have an update on the Civic Club of Vinnytsia in the Ukraine. Many of you will remember a presentation by Wade Fickler, who's setting up a club modeled on our City Club here in Portland. Despite dubbing it Civic rather than City Club, the local press has characterized it as another arm of local government. So the Civic Club of Vinnytsia is having to re-educate people about its purpose even before it holds its first meeting in September. They're holding a press conference next week to try and set the record straight, and have requested a letter of support from us. Our Executive Director, Nancy Hedin, has sent a letter outlining our mission, emphasizing our independence from government and business, and offering mentoring and technical assistance. Thank you, Nancy, for that. All of you who are on the privileged side of the digital divide should take advantage of the City Club website, which offers access to research reports, past club program presentations, upcoming events, membership information, and it all awaits you at www.pdxcityclub.org. Our board host today is Ginny Cooper, member of the Board of Governors and Director of the Multnomah County Libraries. She'll ask the first question of our speakers. Following Ginny's question, we'll open the program to questions from City Club members in the audience, and I suspect that questions will come thick and fast today, so please line up behind the microphone while Ginny is talking, so that we can make the most of our speaker's time. Please identify yourself as a member of the City Club and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from CH2M Hill, Providence Health Systems, and Weyerhaeuser Company Foundation. We're very grateful for their support. Mayor Vera Katz has begun her fourth decade of public service in Oregon. She became the first woman Speaker of the Oregon House in 1985, and among many accomplishments during her 3-year tenure, she authored the Oregon Education Act for the 21st century. Subsequently, as our mayor, she's been tireless champion for the K-12 education and has recently stepped up efforts to improve our children's access to both early childhood learning and to higher education opportunities. So addressing the digital divide in association with the Innovation Partnership seems a very natural progression for Mayor Katz's interests and influences. A word about the Innovation Partnership. It's characterized as Portland's think and do tank. It's a non-profit organization that brings together a broad range of civic leaders to identify and solve persistent community problems that have resisted traditional solutions. Innovation Partnerships has devised an analytical protocol that it's applying to everything from effective education for all to voter participation and to housing displacements. Commissioner Erik Sten is known to City Club audiences for his work on water quality and habitat improvement, on which he's recently addressed us. He became visible as an effective advocate for affordable housing when he was Chief of Staff to Gretchen Kafuri. He continues that effort as a City Commissioner through the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiative and the Home Ownership One Street at a Time program. Commissioner Sten's concerns for social equity extends naturally into the digital divide, and as City Commissioner responsible for the Office of Cable Communication and Franchise Management, he's also in a position to do something about it, as in his recent defense of the city's open access to telecommunications policies. Rey Ramsey is Chief Executive of Economy Corp, a national non-profit organization founded a year ago with the mission of maximizing the potential of technology to help low-income people build assets and raise their standard of living. Prior to founding One Economy, Rey Ramsey was president of the Enterprise Foundation, which is a national non-profit intermediary that helps communities address housing and community development issues. This august panel will tackle the daunting problems posed, particularly to the lower-income members of our community, by America's transformation to a knowledge and technology-based economy. So to begin the discussion, please welcome our Mayor, Vera Katz.
Swallow the mic. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not Brian Scott. I'm filling in for Brian Scott, but if I knew Patty was going to introduce me saying that I have, 4 decades of service, I probably wouldn't have shown up. Let me open this by saying that we all know here that citizenship is not a passive pastime. And we pride ourselves here in Portland involving our citizens in our civic institutions, this being a key one for this community. But we haven't really advanced very far in understanding or addressing the demographic or technical changes in communities all over the state. If you recall your first political campaign, you went door to door, and you were met by somebody there at home at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you had an opportunity to talk to them, and you found somebody next door. And the next time you did it, maybe a few less people were at the door, and then you found yourself writing, "Sorry, I missed you," because people are no longer home during the day. They're no longer home when you phone during the day, and at night they're not ready or they don't want to speak to you. So the old methods of communicating with the public are not very interesting or challenging anymore. And then, of course, we ask people to come to meetings, and we ask people for most of the time we ask them to come to meetings during the day. And hello, we know that most folks are working during the day. So we try, but we haven't quite figured out how to do it yet. Civic participation is suffering even in this city that prides itself in being a meeting mania community. Citizens are being left out, and by being left out, they feel rightfully so that no one is listening to them. Now, it isn't that we don't try. We have budget meetings every 2 years. We have about 10 of them in the community, and we have them on Saturday or in the evenings, and we have them right in the neighborhood. But if you look around at who shows up, they're the natural suspects, the organized groups, the people who have special interests, and it's very hard to understand what the larger community really would like us to do when we're making decisions on how we spend their money. And I understand Adam Davis stood here in May and told you that it wasn't uncommon to see more city staff people at those meetings than citizens ready to testify and tell us what they want us to do. Now, the internet has changed all of this for business. Business used to be open 9 to 5, now it's 24/7, and people can do it from their home, and they can also do it at the workplace with what they shouldn't be doing at the workplace, but it's available for them at the workplace. And this is very true in Portland, since we just edged out San Francisco as being the most wired city in the country. 70% of our households in the city of Portland are wired. So we have an edge, and we ought to use that edge for the benefit of this entire community. Now, government has tried to participate in this brave new world of instant electronic messaging. We have websites, We have online services, but it's still easier to buy a plane ticket. And somebody told me that they just bought rent a villa in Italy ticket than it is to pay a parking ticket. And what we put on the web, and this is not only the city, but it's higher education, it's nonprofit organizations, it's pure propaganda. We put on the web what we want you to read. And in some cases, we put on the web what we want you to hear. We need to give people the opportunity to choose for themselves and select the information they want. We need to give them an opportunity to select the issues they want to track or question us, and the projects that they're interested in, as well as the information that they don't want. We shouldn't become part of the junk mail electronic stream. But even more important, we need to respond to citizens when they respond to our emails. We need to answer those emails, and we need to answer them with relevant information. I was fortunate to be asked to serve on a task force created by the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. And at that task force on performance measuring and accountability, I met the representatives from the Fund for the City of New York. They tackle issues that are of great challenge to city government in New York, and issues that government are really very interested in, but they don't have the time, they don't necessarily have the capabilities of tracking that kind of information and doing that research. And after a while, they forget about it and it's ignored. And the fund takes those issues on. So I came back because I try to bring back something to Portland that I've learned in other communities. And I said, you know, we ought to try something that the city of New York did. And so innovative partnership was the answer. As Patty said, it's a new community organization established by city entrepreneurs to tackle persistent civic problems, challenging the status quo, questioning everything, and taking nothing for granted. It is led by Ruth Scott, with a remarkable group of volunteers and staff embarked on 4 projects. One is, what do we do with unused, underutilized old school buildings and turning some real estate liability into community assets. The other one is, how do we rebuild community leadership for this generation and the next generation? The third is, how do we build a statewide network on parenting education? And the fourth, which we're going to talk about today, is E, small e, big V, big O, L-V-E-M-E-N-T. I hope I spelled it right. Evolvement. And that's the topic for today. It seeks to use the internet and related technologies to encourage a more informed and involved citizenry. It's a more transparent and accessible government, and a better informed elected officials. Evolvement will engage more people beyond the usual suspects through technology like the internet. We will target 3 urban neighborhoods by setting up a network with neighbors that neighbors can use to connect with themselves and with civic leadership. The project will measure how citizens behave given an alternative method of communication and compare that with the traditional way we try to communicate with the citizenry. The first phase is linking up with the Innovation Partnership and with the Portland Police Bureau. The Bureau already has crime mappers, which is on the website, which identifies the crime activity in somebody's neighborhood and on somebody's street. So now what we're going to do is make sure that in this pilot project, the neighbors all know it and understand it. There'll also possibly be information on what kind of burglaries are going on at this particular time and where. And if you recall, there were attacks on elderly in the Southwest and Northwest. That kind of information to notify people in certain areas that there is trouble on the streets and they ought to be aware of it. Missing children, missing adults. That kind of information and information being shared back and forth could also be available to those neighborhoods. And really the kind of real-time information as what happened on the streets while they were sleeping the night before. It's like a digital extension of Neighborhood Watch, and certainly the expansion of community policing. Now, we are also going to continue to connect with citizens in formal places and informal places. But this is an added dimension to see if we really have a new way of doing things through the internet and modern technology. So stay tuned. You'll be hearing a lot more about it. Now, as Patty said, we have two speakers here. And as I said, 70% of our citizens are hooked up, 30% are not. Commissioner Sten worries about the 30%. And he's going to lay out his vision for universal access to the information highway, or at least how we can begin getting there. His partner is Rey Ramsey, who will describe the partnership he has with the city, with the innovative partnership and his own company, One Economy Corporation, that will take on evolvement to everyone. So we celebrate, and this is a second program on the celebration of the 150th birthday of the city. And so as we celebrate the 150th birthday of the city, we offer a vision for the future for a more connected city with more engaged citizens. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is a great topic, although I have to say, when I opened up the Metro page today and read that the phone system that we don't own was not working so that you could call and find out that you didn't get a bill from the computer system that we spent $10 million on not to work, I was sort of wondering why I was on a panel to talk about technology. And I was sort of also wondering what it was that I liked so much about technology. But I think I'm going to try and share that with you anyway, although maybe one lesson that I learned, have been learning over and over from, and maybe that phone system problem with our computer is a good place to start, is that technology really is completely neutral. It's a vehicle, but how we use it or do not use it will have dramatic social implications. And I think what I would like to do, it does need to work. We're also learning that. But what I want to do here is maybe just sketch a little bit of the big picture. Ray and I go back quite a while. He was some of you recall 14 years old when Neil Goldschmidt made him the head of the state housing department about 10 years ago. And when I was working for Gretchen, we worked together quite many projects. And so to see him back in this capacity now helping us to take on the digital divide is very, very exciting. And when we split this up a little bit, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what we need to do, and he's going to talk about how we need to do it. I've got the easy task, and you'll hear the hard part from him. I was on a panel not exactly like this, but somewhat similar a couple weeks ago with Alan Weber, who's a former Portlander that started Fast Company magazine. And he made a really important point, I think, that most of us, when we think about the new economy, we really think of the dot-coms and the stock market, boondoggles and the crash and all of those things. And those were an outgrowth of what's changed in the last few years. But in fact, the dot-coms are just one little tiny part. And what's happening in this world right now is the entire way we envision the world has changed. And it hasn't changed because somebody sat out and said, here's what we're going to do. It's the summation of a whole bunch of changes globally all coming at the same time. And together they are a new economy. It's international, it's quick, it's global. And I think Alan's point, which was so good that I'd like to just lift it and share it with you, is that what he sees as the fundamental difference in the new economy is not all those quick communications and other things. Those are symbols of it. But the real fundamental difference, and I think this is a good way to start and to conceptualize it, is that the important unit of business and economics, this is the new economy, has gone from being the corporation to the individual. And that as you look at the world, individuals with email, sometimes with the situation I'm in with the water, they can email you very quickly and get to you with their opinion. The individual can weigh in. And in the old economy, you could not, even if you had a great idea, move it without being at the right place in the power structure. And in the old economy, this is again a symbol of it, but I think it gets right after it. Power was in the holding of information. You were a powerful person if at the top all the information flowed to you and you doled it out as you saw fit, and that was how power flowed. Suddenly that's completely turned on its ear. Power is solely in the flow of information. It is absolutely impossible, as anybody in a political office can tell you, to hold on to any information in this day and age. And what you have to do is move information, think about it, and it's on a global scale. Trade barriers, for good or for bad, there's some good and bad things about that are coming down, and the type of world we live in is very, very different. For me, that's an incredibly optimistic and positive situation. And the reason I think is that I think the old economy, if you look back, and I'm not an expert on exactly when in history, but look at the industrial era and the things that have happened over the last couple centuries, there's no doubt about it that lifespan and quality of life have gone up in the last version of the economy. But we failed miserably as a globe, and certainly in this country, on two key issues using that old economic model, and they are the environment and poor people. If you look closely at the way our system has worked for the last stretch of time, it has chewed up the environment and at the same time spit out people who were, for one reason or another, not able to get into the bottom rungs, whether it was education, medical issues, or whatever it might be that was keeping somebody poor. And those are the two things that I think we have an excellent chance if we seize it. And again, technology is neutral. It will either make the situation better or worse depending on how we use it. But I think technology and the new economy gives us an opportunity to solve those two problems that, despite our best efforts, was absolutely unavailable to us in the last economic model. And I think Portland is the perfect place both to understand that and absolutely to see where we failed. We are the best in the country on so many things. We are the best environmental city in the country, but we have a Superfund site. We're spending $1 billion to clean up a bad sewer system. You name it. I can keep going on and on and on. We have endangered species in every one of our streams, and we're in violation of the Clean Water Act every second of every day of the year. This is the cleanest city in the country. Obviously, the way we ran our economy did not work environmentally. It's equally obvious that you cannot fix up the environment and fix all those mistakes if you're broke, because they're very, very expensive systems. And it's not as simple as this, but what's happening right now is technology and new thinking will allow us, if we're smart about it and seize it, to re-engineer how we do these cities. There are ways to do all of those things. If you would like to solve, Portland is the best city in the country on the issue of global warming, and what the best city means is that between 1992 and 1997, which is where our best numbers are from, we actually reduced the amount of greenhouse gas emissions we let per capita substantially. We actually went up on the whole because of population growth. Nowhere else in the country has done that. To solve the global warming problem, we would actually have to drive 40% less, get double the amount of energy that comes from clean places now, from clean places, improve fuel efficiency by 25%, and make all our buildings 25% more energy efficient. All of those are absolutely doable with existing technology. They were not doable when we started driving cars. This country is not committed to those things, but we could do it. And I think technology gives us the chance. And I think Portland shows that we still have a long way to go, but we're better on these issues than most places, and our economy is thriving. And I would submit to you, if we become the center of environmental and technological change, we will also boom economically at the same time. These issues are coming, and the mayor and I are working and very close to, under her leadership, announcing an economic development strategy that centers just on those things. And I think, not our only strategy, but a key one. And I think technology gives you a chance to clean up the environmental mess. Likewise, poor people and what's happening. We are the most wired city in the country with 70%. That means 30% of the people are not. If Alan Weber's thesis is right, and I think it's almost self-evident that it is, that the economic unit of production is now the individual rather than the corporation, that individual has to be tied into the entire system to be productive. So we are sitting here right now, and this is a symbolic, but I think it's substantively true as well, with 30% of our economic assets, the greatest asset in this new economy, citizens, idle, not tied up, not wired in, not in place to go. So where the new economy, I think, is so darn as exciting is, again, you cannot solve problems unless you have the money in place to do it. I think technology and the idea of connecting people in all of the visionary ways Mayor Katz is talking about and Ray is talking about begins to say getting those people productive again. If we become a place that gets our citizens productive, particularly the ones who are cut out, we will far and away surpass any city in the world, because no city in the world has even as many people working as we do today. If we can get the rest of them into this, to get the 30% that aren't tied into this internet working, there's a way to do it. What is so very, very exciting, and what my lead in here for Ray is, and I always love to say, here's what we need to do, you tell me how to do it, and that's my gift to Ray today, is that it's one thing to wire people, and about 2 years ago, I asked the housing department to say, how would we get every affordable housing unit in the city of Portland internet access? We couldn't figure it out, but we got close. And now all of the new buildings we're building, all of the new buildings we're rehabbing, we're doing internet access. We're finding some ways to get computers donated. I mean, there's ways to do it. But ultimately, again, the technology is neutral. And once you get, we still have a long, long way to go on that front, but once you get the wiring and the computers to the people who are cut out, so what if you don't know how to use them? And what One Economy Corporation has done, and Portland is their pilot city, I think it may have something to do with Ray's background here, but we have got them to come here, we're joining in partnership, is come up with a method and a strategy to take that neutral technology, which we're trying to get to the home, to the libraries, and all of these places, and make it into that engine that helps solve that fundamental problem of the old economy, which is people who are cut out not being economically productive and not being part of it. So for me, and I'm going to wrap here to make sure we have some time at least for questions. 3 speakers is too many on a topic, but we've all got some important things to say. I think Portland ought to be the place that seizes the new economy, not the dot-coms, but the new world, and says, let's take this new opportunity and use it to economically, in a very profitable way, build a society that solves the things that the old economy, the marginal products of the old economy were the environment and poor people. And I think we can build an economy where those are not externalities, but those are assets. And I think technology used right gives us the ability to start doing that, but it ultimately will be our brains and our heart that allows us to make that happen. And that would be my challenge to you, is to figure out how do you take this technology and get it past that somebody can email me very quickly when they didn't get a water bill, and turn it into something that really solves those problems. I think we can, and I think One Economy is the leader in this country in trying to take that on. So it's with great pleasure that I give that very small task to Rey Ramsey. How are we going to do this?
As always, it is great to be back in Portland, Oregon, and it's even better to be on a panel with Erik Sten and Mayor Katz. Portland can, and I believe will, solve some of these issues. I want to step back for a moment, and I'm going to take up Erik's challenge, but what I want to begin by saying is it's really not an issue of technology. This is really about, and we're talking about the 30%, and it may be a little bit more, and certainly across the country it's much more than that. We're really simply talking about people wanting a slice of the pie. People want to be part of the American economy. We are in a digital economy, and a lot of people are left out of that economy. We've done a lot of focus groups at One Economy, and at the top of the list is people wanting technology and wanting resources for their children. You know, no matter what, they may say, I don't know what a Pentium is, I don't understand any of this, but I want my child to not be left behind. And I remember I told a story once, and it's so appropriate. In the old economy, I remember my parents, when we moved from New Jersey, when we moved from Philly to New Jersey for better schools and better housing. And in that day, when a parent wanted to make an investment in their child, they got this big old clunky leather-bound books called encyclopedias that some people, we have these new interns in our office, they look at me, I have no idea what that is. And so we were very proud when my parents brought the Encyclopedia Britannica. And they bought that because that was them saying, I'm going to give you a leg up. I'm going to give you a leg up in our society. It's no different today. It's a different tool, but it's parents saying, I want something for my children. And so instead of talking about the digital divide, I talk about the digital opportunity. We have a digital opportunity, but we have some challenges. The first challenge is that we need to shape this opportunity into a vision. So what's the vision? It is involvement, involving citizens in their citizenry, in government. But it's got to be a vision that captures people's heads and their hearts. A vision that will withstand the rigor of any kind of intellectual exercise, the rigor of a business plan or a business model, but also a vision that will inspire people. We have another challenge. We need to figure out a strategy that is practical, that can be implemented, and that is cost effective. It can't be something that is only a wonderful boutique pilot in one neighborhood or in one housing project in one city in the country, but something that can be spread across the nation. We also have a challenge to make sure that we are inclusive, because it's very easy to create think tanks and policy groups, and then we social engineer this, and then we overlay it in a neighborhood, because it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. We have thrown millions and billions of dollars at certain social issues, and we are still where we are. And most important of our challenges, I believe, is what I refer to as the pervasive disbelief that we have that something can be done to solve our most retractable problems, or most intractable problems. There's a disbelief that certain problems are too big. You go to a migrant farm worker camp and you say, it's just, we can't even deal with this. We can't deal with the language issues. We can't deal with all the problems. We can deal with this. And the optimism you see coming from the mayor and from Councilman Erik Sten shows you that there is this interest in making something happen, and there are, although not enough, some folks like them across the country. Let's talk about the digital, what people refer to as the digital divide. A lot of it, 80% of it, when people talk about the digital divide, addresses the issue of what I call the access gap. So when you heard the figure today of the 30-70, that's generally an access gap. You have 70% have access, 30% in theory don't, although some of those folks will use the libraries and will use the schools, and those are all figured in. In fact, when we're talking about the 70%, we look at where people are most able to access technologies. So when we think of the digital divide, it's usually couched in terms of access. That has advantages and it has disadvantages in terms of solving the problem. Move to the second gap. The second gap, and I'm speaking quickly because I'm trying to cover a large period, a large amount of information here, is a content gap. There's an organization called the Children's Partnership, and they did a study, and they looked at the content that was on the internet, and they did an analysis to determine how relevant it was and how accessible and useful it was for low-income people. And the percent that they came up with was astonishing, because they said about 2% of the material was really relevant and accessible and easily used by low-income individuals. So that in theory, even if you overcome the access gap, what are you going to do about the issue of content? And then, if you have content, assuming we can make that happen, and we resolve the issue of access, there's what I refer to as the utilization gap. That you can have all of these things in front of you, but unless it is absorbed and utilized by the individual and by collective groups in society, you're going to be where we are now. Which is why I say the digital divide is a digital opportunity. It's an opportunity to take all of this incredible energy and focus and talent that we have had in building this digital economy and digital society, and focus it on our most vexing problems. And the problem that I focus on is, again, what Erik was talking about and what the mayor has also been focusing on, is the issue of poverty, the issue of social and economic isolation. Social and economic isolation is either and or a cause of and a byproduct of poverty. The things that middle class and upper class people call connections, or just basic information, or just the things that we just know how to do. We know how to get certain things. We understand issues around health insurance, life insurance, putting money aside for retirement, knowing where to go for those resources. For a lower income person, that is a day-to-day struggle. It's a day-to-day struggle when someone has to get on 2 bus lines to then be able to get into the middle of the line to then get her services, just one level of services, to get that child care voucher that she needs for her family. So we may take that for granted, but there is a great deal of isolation socially and economically. And yet we have not applied some of the talents in this digital culture to that. Imagine a time when it would be common for a person to be able to access their health care, to be able to access their social services online. Or look at the financial services industry. The fact that we have in this country 22% of renters in the United States have no banking services whatsoever. But imagine if we could aggregate those underutilized folks to make it easier for the financial institutions to reach them in their home or in other easily accessible places. The digital opportunity is our opportunity to take some of the resources that we have been allocating the way we've been accustomed to allocating it and going about it in a different way. So we have to reimagine what we have dreamed to be possible and turn it into something different. Now, One Economy, very briefly. We are one attempt to reimagine the way we've been doing things. We refer to ourselves as the sum of many parts. What we've intended to do is create a vehicle, a vessel, that will bring the private sector, government, and nonprofits together for the benefit of individuals. And to not look at technology, it's very easy to look at technology myopically. And you can be an institution and you say, as an institution, I want to use technology to get my stuff out there. I want to use technology to reach X, Y, and Z. Instead, we have to say, and try to view it through the eyes of that 30%, and say, how can we use technology as a tool to help that person help themselves? And one of the examples, a number of nonprofits that we have encountered over the last year would say to me, well, we're in the digital society. We're there. We're ready. We're helping people with our services. So you go to their website, and what do you find? You find the letter from the executive director. You find, in essence, their org chart online, as I call it, and all the names of the different divisions within the agency. And you say to yourself, is that what that person wants? Does she want to have that? Isn't she just looking for, how do I get a voucher? Am I eligible for it? How do I get it? The function, not the name of all the divisions, not the names of all the departments. And so we viewed it through the wrong set of eyes. And so in creating One Economy, our goal has been to focus on the issue of access, the issue of content, and the issue of what I refer to as culture. In access, what we want to do is make sure that all of the new housing that's built is appropriately equipped for technology, so that it makes it much more affordable than retrofitting the housing. We want to try to make sure that we bring as much bandwidth to that house as possible. And again, you notice my focus on the home. We're focusing on the home because we believe that is the place of culture, and it's the place of learning, and it's the place of greatest convenience, the home. And so bringing the hardware, the computer, bringing internet connectivity to the home is significant. The second issue is content. We're spending an enormous amount of time trying to reposition, aggregate, and develop forms of content that range from financial services, healthcare, educational tools in one spot, so that a person can easily go and retrieve the information that he or she needs. And we call that, we have a website that we've just launched, and it's in a beta test right now, and we have a national website, but there will be a local website. And later in question and answer, you can ask me, well, why was it given this name? And we joke around it internally, but it's called The Beehive. And it's www.thebeehive.org. And I'd love for you to check that out. Give us your feedback on what you think. But that is what we've put together for the low-income consumer. The issue of culture. Culture is the issue of being able to be comfortable with the technology, being able to utilize the technology, having the training and not just being a passive recipient of services, but utilizing it for its fullest potential. And there are a whole host of initiatives that we have in that regard, and I can save those to the question and answer period. I just want to make a couple of more points. We can do a lot of things locally. We can do a lot in Portland. I'm biased. I think it's the best city in the country. And I think that it will be the most successful in making this happen, and it's not an accident that we chose to work here amongst the 5 other cities that we've chosen to work in the United States. But what we can do with technology is we can aggregate users and create a market. You see, in the United States, there's a huge industry where low-income people live. It's called the affordable housing industry. It's public housing. It's nonprofit housing. We have 13 million housing units like that across this country. That's a sizable market. We have 30+ million people who are outside of the economic mainstream. If you aggregate all that together and you find a way to bundle services in the utility realm, bundle services around bringing internet access, the phone, and other services, there's an economic benefit there. But the benefit ought not go to only one entity. We ought to produce, through this investment, a social dividend. And we ought to take that social dividend to make sure those who are in most need receive some of that benefit, as well as the private sector. And we can do this. And technology opens up a realm of possibilities for us to be able to create a social dividend. So through all of this, focus on the content, focusing on creating access solutions, particularly geared toward the home, and dealing with the issue of culture. We can establish a network across this country, aggregate that benefit through these investments, and create a social dividend. So that is what we are attempting to do. So by starting here in Portland, working with the Housing Authority, working with neighborhood organizations, we are going to get all the units wired. We are going to help the families get the computers, and then we are going to have a destination in partnership with government that brings in private sector resources, that bring in nonprofit resources into a destination that serves the needs and the potential of the potential users. And that's the solution that One Economy is looking to do. I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that one of our board members is here today that I'm very proud of, because we have a national operation but a local effort that's been started, and that's former Congresswoman Elizabeth Furse, who I want to point out right there. And Dave McConnell, I think, is here somewhere, who runs our local operation. He was parking, there he is. He parked and dropped me off, and he runs our local operation. And then on a point of personal privilege, which I must point out, because I would be remiss if I didn't, my sister is in the front row, Melanie Ramsey, most important, so I want to point her out. And I conclude by saying this, that this is a time of unprecedented ingenuity, of change. This is a time of enormous creativity in our society. It's a time where we can take these talents and apply them so that we can end some of the social and economic isolation, that we can foster more e-involvement, more involvement in civic engagement. One Economy is just one of those efforts, by no means the only effort. This digital divide can be a digital opportunity. We just have to decide on which road we're going to take. This road may be less traveled today, but it will make all of the difference if we choose it. Appreciate being here. Thank you. We can do this.
I'm Ginny Cooper. I'm a member of the City Club Board, and I have the honor of asking the first question. I hope others of you will make your way to the microphone so that we can effectively use this time we have. Nationally, the penetration rate of internet access is much, much lower for African Americans and for Hispanics. It's just over half what the penetration rate is for access for Caucasian citizens. Can you tell me what special efforts are being done in Portland to address that gap, or Ray and your company as well?
Yeah, this actually applies to both of us, because in the effort that Erik and I are undertaking in the city, the neighborhoods that we're focusing on have a high proportion of African American and Hispanic individuals in those households. And so there is a targeted effort to make sure that that kind of inclusivity occurs with this project. So it's both Portland and across the country.
Yeah, I don't think I'd add much other than that it's another piece of the content and culture issue, as I see it, as Ray said it. I mean, I think it's the access is important, but as you're dealing with different types of communities, then the issue of are they going to use it, and that's how is the website portrayed, and I don't think there's any magic to technology. It's the same issue in just about everything we face, that whether it's Latino or African American communities or Asian, or we have new Russian immigrants that are here in very large numbers. Almost every set of services we take has to have special efforts to figure out how to get the communication right and the involvement right. And I would say, if anything, Ginny, it's a very good question, because it's probably one of the areas we're still the weakest on.
Let me just piggyback by saying that the 3 areas that I identified for the police project will be in the poor neighborhoods, and 1 will be in East County and 2 will be in the city of Portland.
Hi, Chris Smith, club member. I want to talk a little bit about the access gap and postulate that it's actually not just a gap, but also kind of a caste system. I had a very personal reminder of this a couple days ago. We were talking to our 13-year-old about his latest habit, which is instant messaging. And we said, well, why don't you pick up the phone and call your friends and talk to them rather than instant messaging all the time? And he said, well, Mom, if they're online, their phone line's tied up. And that illustrated to us that having a DSL line and not having to worry about that makes a huge difference. And I would suggest that there's the gap, people have no access, but then there are people who have instant on access, people who have high bandwidth access. Right. If we're going for universal access, what's the kind of the level that we're targeting, and how will we not only get the people who aren't online there, but the people who have lower levels of access to that level?
Well, we've set as a goal to try to bring as much affordable bandwidth to the properties as we can, because you're absolutely right. There is a gap in terms of there's a bandwidth gap, unfortunately. And the bandwidth is not only because, well, you can use it while you're on the phone if you have DSL and those sorts of things, but it opens up new areas of programming that you can have if you have that kind of bandwidth. We have a special corporate partnership with Cisco, and there are 3 gentlemen at the table behind you, which you can meet later. They are working with us as a corporate entity. Cisco, without getting into all the details, they produce routers, and the routers are basically the switching stations that open up bandwidth. They are, the 2 of the gentlemen are assigned to Seattle, 1 is assigned to Portland, but they're working in the Northwest. They are working on what we call digital solutions to help us resolve this in our projects. But we're working with them nationally. Just the other day, 13 people from Cisco joined One Economy. They will work for us full-time for this entire year, working on this very same issue. So it's something that's going to take a while, but we've got that corporate commitment to join with us. And what I also didn't say was that there are a number of other corporate entities working with us on this issue. Our entire site that I mentioned is being hosted by AOL, for example, and there are other companies, Discovery Communications and others, that are joining with us. I said we are creating a vehicle to help people across the country.
Chris, I think it's very quickly a key issue. And I think the aggregation that Ray is trying to do is a key piece, because if you can get a lot of accounts together, there's big economies of scale, and so I think there's an opportunity there. Also, I mean, sometimes it's good to be behind. It's not like any of us in the country are on the cutting edge of trying to get everyone wired. The internet's been around for a little while at this point. So at least as these efforts come through, we ought to clearly skip the phone line access and jump to DSL or cable modems or whatever it might be, because at least the good thing about being late is you can buy maybe you can buy more for less now, and so that's good. And I think it's very important, and I know Ray and I have talked about this a lot. It's a struggle to maybe you can get 486s for free, but do you really want to go put those into people's home when they're not going to be useful with DSL? And so those are I think it's a very key issue, and it's got to be. You've got to find ways to get there. I think the aggregation is the key, because I think the profitability is in the number of accounts. Like you look at even something like all the home grocer businesses seem to be out of business, but if you still had home grocers in this economy, even at a very low income, if you've got 100 units in a place and people are buying $50 worth of groceries, it's $5,000. They'll come to my house for free for $75. They're going to fight to get that account, and that's how you get to the better access is to bundle those.
Good afternoon, Erwin Mandel, City Club member. I'd like to shift the focus away from the technology and the economic issues back to government and the effect of digital communication on government. Mayor Katz has noted that it's very difficult to get people out to take part in governmental processes, and somehow the solution might be the digital revolution. I'm a great fan both of Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, and also a great believer in the law of unintended consequences. What concern I may have deals with, we have a citizenry, possibly in the future, communicating with our governmental leaders with the internet, instant messaging, email, what have you, but there's no face-to-face involvement. What I could see as an old science fiction fan, in addition, is a society where we don't really know our governmental leaders anymore. We miss the very human interactions that we see, the body language, facial expressions, and the subtleties of voice and meaning. Do you think everything is coming up roses? I got you, Patty.
Your point is well made. And I remember I qualified what I said, that this is not all that we're going to have. But of course, we can, in fact, be on the screen at the same time that we're messaging, and though there is a little time delay, I am online every week where people can hear me, see me, and then chat. The thing is, that worries me, is they don't listen to me. They're chatting about something else, and I'm talking to them about government. And so there's the challenge for us, is trying to figure out what the people in the chat room are truly interested in, that's going to engage them in conversations with me and the producer of online. We haven't hit it yet. But we do need to continue making those connections. And let me just add, I've talked to some people who are struggling with nonprofits who know that their financing is going to run out and they need to have some resources once their grants are over. And they are looking at exactly what Ray and Erik are talking about, how they can make money to keep their services going. And a lot of it is going to be exactly aggregating the information online.
Promise King member, beam me up. I'm going to say this. I want to express my thanks to Commissioner Sten. You've been very marvelous. I just want to thank you for your innovation and youthful leadership. I'm so proud of you. In my past life, I was told that only the old can do it right, but you're doing it right now, and I'm so proud of you. And to Mayor, I also want to commend you for your effort. One of my concerns is issue you made mention of, that it's how do we rebuild community leadership? Erik Sten, built by XPAC. I'm trying to build community leadership in the community that I come from. How? Because I'm looking at the issue of technology and looking at leadership. We're not going to move forward if we don't have a critical leadership to move us together forward with respect to technology. So, can you give me some pointer on how to rebuild community leadership, which is very critical in this regard?
Yeah, well, thank you, Promise, for the kind words. Ultimately, I don't personally. I think technology can help. It's kind of like the other issues. And actually, I'm probably as frustrated as Promise is about some of the lack of involvement of getting younger people. And I noticed our new president's made a commitment to try and, during his time as City Club president, to try and take this issue on, and I think it couldn't be more warranted. community involvement to me is really an organizing effort, and it really, it has to be a human interaction where people reach out to other people and show them why they ought to be involved. And I'm not sure there's any other way to get there, and I know Promise has been doing that. I think technology can make it easier, because I think you can get to people. I was just thinking a little bit about Erwin's question. I think we're in danger of people not seeing their counsel and all of those things. But I tell you, if it wasn't on cable TV, fractions of the people who see it in person would see it at all. So I think generally we're still in a position where technology helps. And I guess, I don't want to go on forever, that I think in the idea of building community leadership, it's got to be organizing and using technology as a tool, as opposed to if you start an email list, it's not going to really do anything. But I think the empowerment that Ray's trying to get at should build new leadership. And I think my point about the power of the new economy is finding the good ideas that exist in the people that are cut out. If anybody knows how to make something work with nothing, it's the people who don't have what you need in the society, but still manage to raise kids and get them through high school and college and those sorts of things. And finding those people and helping them get into leadership positions will radically change the tone of the city for the better.
Lily Mandel, I wonder, have you really thought this out? Could it possibly cause a divide? Having people not glued to their seats in front of email, and could you not be creating an isolation and a divided world, and where we all sit here and this is all we do? Think of the consequences. Everything in our lives is governed here. Are we perhaps creating a monster and doing just the opposite? It is a little frightening. Or maybe to get your world, I would suggest having every infant wired at the moment of birth.
I think that was aimed at Ray.
Well, the funny thing was with Eric, we were sitting here trying to say, who's going to take that one? And I either won or I lost. No, seriously, I think it's worthy of debate to sort of say, well, how far do you go? And for years, I guess, what I would say is that in this society, we have debated whether or not technology would stop us. People talked about, oh my God, with the telephone, is that going to stop people from wanting to see each other because they'll be able to now get on the phone? And I'm not making light of this. It is all about how we apply and how we use technology. Anything that's invented can be used for good purposes, and anything can be abused. I was with the mayor of the city, of a city. I was about to say the name of a city, and I don't want to put his name out there. But he said to me in my first meeting with him, and we were talking about this program, and he said, well, I hate technology, and because it's going to stop people from talking to each other, and da-da-da-da-da. And after he said all that, I just said to him, respectfully, Mayor, well, basically the genie's out of the bag. We are in a digital world, and we have a choice. We can choose to turn it into a tool that will help us, or we stand by and let things be done to us. And I said, that's the choice that we have to make.
There's technology at work. Let me respond to Promise. Where is he?
He's to the right. He's over to the
Okay. As I said, one of the projects that the Innovative Partnership has selected was this issue of leadership, because there was a fear among the board members and the staff that we have lost our way in trying to find the new leaders of this community. And some of us, 4 decades later, are still worried about the fact that we don't have that new leadership other than the leadership generated through XPAC and through organized ways of getting people involved in their community. Some of that is being done by the Association Portland Progress. Some of that is being done by the Black Chamber of Commerce or the Latino Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but it's not good enough. And so stay tuned to how the Innovative Partnership is going to try to bring some new leadership together.
My name is Sharon Joy, City Club member, and actually I don't know which question to ask. I have 3 particular interests. Of course, I'm in this housing you were talking about, I'm also one of those people that are isolated that would like to key in. So, I would like it in the housing and not necessarily through wires. I want to be able to relate to other people in the housing to work. But also the sewer situation, I think Japan had that pretty well down in having removable sidewalks, of which the gutter was underneath. So a lot of these different things would not have to tear up the street to replace, such as telephone. In my mind, telephone wires even should be under, because the skyline is very ugly here in comparison to Japan. And then again, I talked to a policeman because my friend wanted to pet one horse and the other one wasn't so friendly. So I asked him if I could talk to him instead. He says, well, yes. He says, I'm glad to have somebody friendly. And I says, well, I can understand that because I know why I was unfriendly. You're the first man I've spoke to. And he says, well, what would you want us to do? So I explained. And he says, oh, I wish you were mayor. Well, anyway.
One of my officers said that? In the mounted patrol unit?
He said that.
The one that we've given all the money to for their new barn?
So I went up to another man later, and policeman, and I asked, well, why don't you do this? And he says, it makes too much sense. It won't fly on the bureau. But anyway, the point being that what I really would like, of course, which is something that I know most about, of course, is the disabled and the housing. Now, I don't want to waste time on your time. It's valuable. How can I present the idea effectively without getting, too complicated is the point. I would like to see it fly.
No, I think all the things you're hitting, if you're saying, Sharon, you've got some specific ideas you want to let fly, Marshall, raise your hand. That's Marshall Runkle, who's both my housing liaison and my technology liaison, and we could spend some time looking at that in some detail.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Hi, Pearline Craft member. I'm wondering how to put the microphone back on. I'm wondering if the access issue isn't going to be an easier one than the content issue. It seems that we're really rolling on that, so could you address that a little bit?
Yeah, no, you hit on it. There's no question, and that's why, when the Children's Partnership was made up of, it was funded by the Ford Foundation and a number of entities to study this. It's the toughest problem because, look at the companies that have gone out of business in the .com space. They've been content-related companies. And so the thought now that you're going to get people to do content for lower-income people, which is a market with less profitability, makes it that much more difficult. This is precisely why at the beginnings of starting One Economy, where we said as a nonprofit, needs to be a nonprofit opportunity, we're not going to make profit off of this, for us to focus on this and then bring in other partners. And so, but the partners are going to be governmental entities, other community-based organizations with their content, and then we have found private content companies like Discovery Communications and others who have said, we've got materials that can be repositioned to be useful in that market. Can we work with you? And so there are those like that we are working with, and it's actually very exciting to start, again, aggregating those, so that, again, if we have more aggregation from around the region and the country, the more likely it is we're going to be able to pull that off. But it is a major undertaking, and so we're starting in several cities like Washington, D.C., New York, Portland, Oregon, and then we hope to show other cities that you can do this too. And it creates a vehicle so that one nonprofit doesn't have to start in their neighborhood where they don't have the kind of budgets. Most nonprofits have very tiny budgets, and for them to take that on is a massive undertaking. But if all they have to do is join somebody else and there's a template for what they have to do with their content, then it's an easier exercise for them. And so we're trying to make ease of use, ease of participation at the heart of what we're doing with this content aggregation. And I know we're going to be successful with it.